trade deadline looms on Tuesday. What did you make of the two moves that have been made so far?
Not surprising because both those guys had seen their roles diminish significantly, with Keon White actually being a healthy scratch this past week. But, it's still remarkable that you get so little in return for a couple of guys who are second-round picks who at one point were presumed to be real contributors and have high-end physical ability. White,
especially Duggar, because Duggar was good.
He was.
At least, White was annoying because people freaked out because he had a good game. And isn't that basically what happened with him? He had like a game, correct?
He had a handful. I'll give him a handful. It was 2 games to start last year.
Right.
And then I think it was the season opener. It was the Eagles they played 2 years ago in week 1 of the season.
He had 1 sack in his last 20 games, Phil.
I don't think it was that. I don't think it was quite that bad. It was 1 in his last 15. It was 1 in his. Well, he had 5. He was credited for 5 in his first 2 games.
Fine. There's no denying Keon White wasn't good.
No,
for a
he
while,
wasn't good. I'm not saying he was good.
No. I know you're not.
Okay.
I know you're not. That's what I'm telling John.
I'm talking more to John. He's
it was
more
actually
angry at me.
10 and a half sacks in those first 2 games.
Yeah.
So
he was just jumping on piles. He was just jumping on piles at that point. But Duggar was good and deserved an extension. So like those things are Duggar's different. Duggar, I like Duggar. Like I understand he doesn't fit with this team, but Duggar, there's a reason someone wanted him. But Keon White drove me crazy because he had a game, and then everyone's like, "Oh, Keon White, he's like the next, he's the next Reggie White." Not kidding. Like oh, this kid, he's angry, he's mean, and you're like, all right. And then he doesn't do anything but Keon White, and then it didn't go away.
Yeah,
like enough.
Yeah,
Duggar was productive for this team. Go ahead.
I wanted to get your temperature on Duggar. It just seems to me Vrabel didn't like him from the second he took over, and to trade him to a team that statistically you still may see in the playoffs at some point. I mean, that goes against what most NFL head coaches want to do. It just seems like he was so eager to get rid of him for about 3 months.
Yeah, it's because he was not at all a scheme fit for them. There are significant differences between the Belichick and Mayo schemes and what Vrabel wants to do now, especially at that safety position, where a lot of times you're going to be asked to cover like half the field and play the deep part of the field a significant amount of the time. That's not Kyle Duggar's game. Kyle Duggar's essentially an undersized linebacker who'll come up and thump guards in the run game and, be a factor like closer to the line of scrimmage. Whereas in this scheme now, again, it's deep half. It's a lot of man-to-man coverage. Again, not Kyle Duggar's strength, even under the Bill Belichick and Gerard Mayo schemes. So he just wasn't a fit, and they, considered moving him before the season began. I couldn't, in large part because of the salary, and they still had to eat a bunch of salary just to get rid of him. So not stunning. It does leave you relatively thin on a roster that is across the board kind of thin already.
Right.
At 2 different positions. And it wouldn't surprise me. They just actually added a safety off the practice squad from Miami. So, maybe you consider that a 1-for-1 swap. But on the edge, that's a premium position. And that's a position where they've had basically 2 guys contribute.
So you have to think, and there are edge rushers available, but then it gets into a philosophy. And this is where I'm interested in your opinion especially, is that so you're in a position to add, obviously, right? What are you willing to give up in terms of future assets to improve this year's team? So let's even go as far as to improve this year's team, but with a guy in his, say, his late 20s with term, who is going to be on the team for the next couple years. How far are you willing to go? I don't care who the player is. That's not the issue. But just philosophically, how far are you willing to go? What are you willing to give up? Where do you draw the line?
Well, so I do think the player matters. Like Max Crosby, right? He's playing on a bad team. The Raiders have said, I think they've actually told him himself that they're not planning on trading him, but he's 28 years old.
But there's always an offer. So
he's a premier pass rusher.
So Quinnen Williams, the Jets don't want to trade, and they're saying we won't. But if you go offer him 2 first-round picks, they're going to trade him.
Right.
So the Patriots aren't in a position to give up 2 first-round picks for Max Crosby. But say there's a player with a couple years of term. Let's just use A.J. Brown as an example, even though that's not happening. Philadelphia would be out of their minds at the deadline to trade him. You trade him in the offseason. You don't trade him at the deadline. But say A.J. Brown is available. Now, I know receiver turns out it's not like the biggest position of need for you. Would you give up a first-round pick, which might not even be necessary, but would you give up a first-round pick for a player of the age of A.J. Brown?
I would consider it. And to me, I think I personally would be more aggressive than the Patriots would be, because I think they are viewing this, and rightfully so. It's a fair argument on both sides, I think. Listen, this is our first year of a new regime. We're trying to build something here. We weren't expected to be Super Bowl contenders year one, and really, if you gave us true serum, we would tell you we're not. And so why are we going to sacrifice 5 years of team control, cost-effective, hopefully starting caliber player at least, to try to really push it in this season that we never anticipated would be a championship caliber season for us anyway? Like, let's stick to our plan, and let's look at this thing long term and make sure we are actually building something. That was the word that Mike Vrabel emphasized yesterday when he spoke to us. We're in our first year. We're trying to build something here. Now, he didn't rule out making additions, but to me, that's an indication, okay, I think they're going to be reluctant to part with those early kinds of picks.
Okay, and so also something with the trade deadline, if you're, and this is coming from another angle, just to see who's available and why you might wait for the offseason. If you're a team, and this, I don't have an answer to this, I'm interested in your opinion. If you're a team that's not firing their coach, okay, so you're not, or your GM, if they're in place, how, even if players have expiring contracts, like, are you willing to give up a star with an expiring contract at the expense of the rest of your season when you're trying to build a program?
I think most coaches are not willing to do that.
And I would agree with that philosophy. So that
I think more of them should be, but they won't be.
It depends, because you can get yourself, your message can get lost if you're losing and if teams know you're conceding. Like, you know, people mention Dan Campbell and stuff. Like, Dan Campbell had a terrible first year, but they were progressing as it went on. And then the next year, they didn't make the playoffs. But remember, they beat Green Bay in the final game of the season to keep them out of the playoffs. And in fact, I think they started off 2-something and then ended up running off a bunch of wins at the end.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
I think you're right.
So I'm talking about the Patriots too, in that what's available and why it might be more difficult to pull someone away at the deadline than it would be to add in the offseason. Because if I'm a team that's not, like, if I'm Miami, who do you want? Like, everyone's gone.
Sure.
Like, who do you want? But if I'm a team that is not looking to fire their coach and like you said, is trying to build culture, I'm not positive, unless someone's a malcontent and demanding a trade, that I want to get rid of them. Now, there are starting pieces I get rid of, but I'm talking about star players. Like, you could get like a linebacker, or like you could get like a safety, like, you know what I'm saying, or a nickel corner.
Depth. Right.
But like, but I'm not going to give you like a guy, even if he's expiring, that I believe it could be responsible for a couple wins for us, because I'm trying to build my program.
I think that's all very fair. There's just so few of those types of guys that are available. Like, I think you could make the argument.
Though. That's why I'm saying that would be the thing, is that Cincinnati give up Hutchinson. Hendrickson, sorry,
Yep.
Hutchinson.
Yep.
Aiden, he just signed that huge deal, which is what the Lions did, by the way. They kept all those guys. All these guys got massive deals. It's just I don't know. You hear names getting thrown around that might be available at the deadline, and I'm like, if I'm that team, I'm not giving them up, because I'm not willing to concede the rest of the season unless I'm blowing everything up. Go ahead.
In theory, though, Phil, don't you think the Patriots should be more aggressive, whether it be at the deadline or this coming off season?
Well, this offseason, you should go nuts.
Well, that's what I'm saying, because Drake Maye is going to make $65 or $70 million a season very soon. Christian Gonzalez is going to get a significant bump in pay sooner than that. A significant part of your cap is going to get crushed by these salaries. And while you have your quarterback on a rookie contract, should you not take advantage of how good he's playing?
That's my stance. I think they should be aggressive. And I think they've found themselves in the middle of a season that nobody could have anticipated, in that, number one, your quarterback has made the leap, quote unquote, and he is a legitimate MVP candidate. I think he probably has been the first half MVP of the NFL. You couldn't have seen that coming. You're 6-2. You're in an AFC that feels relatively open because the Ravens have been down and banged up. The Bengals are without Joe Burrow. The Ravens have an easy schedule, and Lamar's coming back.
They're going to win that division,
That
and they're going to be
defense
the only team that makes the
still
playoffs from that
stinks.
division.
They might.
But anyway,
But Fred,
you're not, with Lamar Jackson, you're not beating Baltimore in the playoffs. But what I will say,
you're not going to have another year where Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, half
Right.
of these quarterbacks that you have to fight through, are missing significant time, and their teams are hurt. Because
But how
of it.
about this? I think Drake Maye's every bit as good as them. And how about this? When I'm watching the draft as a Patriots fan this year, I'm not even so much interested in who's on the board because I'm going to take them. I'm interested in who's on the board and who wants them. Because I think before the draft, during the draft, these are pieces during that period I'm willing to, some team gets desperate for some kid or wants to trade, and you can trade picks around
Sure.
and add talent there. I think that's easier than at the trade deadline.
That's the position the Patriots were in for a long time.
Right.
How many times did they just trade entirely out of the first round?
But I would trade for existing talent too, like at that point, or before the draft. I don't. Isn't it easier at the offseason
yes.
to do that?
So
Yes.
the picks are more highly valued
Right.
in the offseason. Right now, people throw around picks willy-nilly because you're paying a premium to add the talent in real time. So to your point, it might be a little bit harder to pull some of these guys away, high-end players away from their teams midseason, but you might be able to do it in the offseason because those picks that you have to give away will be more highly valued.
Yeah, I would. So that's just, if I'm the Patriots, absolutely this offseason. And look, free agency is free agency, and it worked this year. You got Milton Williams. I mean, you got a kid that looks like he's going to be effective for a long time. That's not how you're going to build the team. You can hit in free agency, but I would be open to moving picks this offseason and trying to get established players, absolutely. And my argument would be against the AFC being wide open. Lamar Jackson on Baltimore, and I think you got a Burrow situation here that you're every bit as good as those guys. There's a chance that your quarterback's and your organization's better than Cincinnati under any circumstances.
There's just so many teams to get. You got to get through the Chiefs, Justin Herbert and the Chargers, Burrow and the Bengals, Lamar and the Ravens, who again have maybe one of the worst defenses in football, or have to this point at least. I just look at it like if two of those teams aren't real factors this year, that's a rare opportunity that you might have to try to take advantage of.
For all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.